Oh, hey, it's me. That long piece of hay that's hanging from your horse's forelock that's just out of reach. Lindsay LaBella. Well, today we're sitting down with a local adventurer, Steve French. With his company Pack Paddle and Ski, Steve has ventured where few travelers dare to go, across the rugged terrains of Mongolia on horseback. He embraced the nomadic lifestyle right alongside the locals, and he shares real challenges of navigating this remote landscape, the unique bonds that he's formed with the people and the half-wild horses. So sit back and listen, and Steve will tell us why this ancient land's culture and horsemanship left such a lasting impression on him. Because you're listening to Rochester Trail Riders. Today we're back at Easton. We're up in what we like to call the living room, which is not quite a living room anymore, but we're here today with a local guy, Steve French. How you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Are you loving this?
I am. This is fun.
Steve actually and his brother, from what I understand, have a company called Pack Paddle and Ski.
Correct.
And you guys do some wild things. And when we were stuck in a trailer together, or truck, I should say, for like 2 hours driving to a horse show, you got to telling me something along the lines of, you've been to Mongolia. And I went, time out. I need this story, and I need to ask so many more questions than the short time that we had together in a truck. Tell me a little about Pack Paddle and Ski and how you guys even got to the point of saying, let's even get to Mongolia.
So my brother Rick runs it primarily now, and they take trips all around the world. He just got back from New Zealand, spending a month in New Zealand. And the reason, and there's a site, packpaddleski.com. You can check it out. I'm going to Norway next year skiing, so that's a summer trip.
Good Frisians out there.
Oh, yeah. So my goal is to ride horses on every continent. So that's one of my goals in life. I don't know about Antarctica. But the reason Mongolia came about is I love horses, always have, ever since I was a little kid. I actually started riding lessons with Mike Kelly over in Geneseo when I was a little tyke, and fell in love with it, and then got older and didn't do it for a long time. And then my neighbors got horses that they didn't ride, and I started riding their horses. But Mongolia came about because I've always, ever since I could ride, I always read anything I could. I collected Rawhide Kid comic books. I read Westerns, Louis L'Amour. I own every book he's ever written. And I've read tons of things about the Mongolians and how expert horsemen they are.
I've seen a bunch of documentaries, and it fascinates me on what their horsemanship skills and what we try to do and how easy it seems to come to them.
We can't even compare. They live it. We go out to the barn, tack up our horse, go for a ride, put our horse away. They live it. They have this one town called Tesseling. They have 3 boys that are 15, 16 years old, and when it becomes wintertime, they take all the horses from the town, so over 1,000 horses, out into the steppes, and they set up a teepee, and every 3 days they have to move the teepee because they graze all the grass down. And it's minus 30, minus 40 degrees. They lose a lot of horses, unfortunately. So the winters can be super, super harsh on the horses. When you look at the history of Mongols and riding, and it's their culture, and it's an amazing place.
So for folks that are not familiar, really, like we go Mongolia with like China. China's a big place.
Correct.
Give us a little geographic footprint on where you were.
Okay, so if you look at Mongolia on a map, you'll find Russia on the top, Kazakhstan on the western side, and China down below it. So they're kind of sandwiched in between all those countries. And they, up until I believe 1986, it was one of the only communist countries that went back to democracy without a war.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
Yeah, as recently as 1986, they were a communist country ruled by pretty much China. Huh. And they also, one of the issues that they're facing now, they've got unbelievable land. So 80% of the people roughly live in the cities. The rest live out in the steppes. So you've got huge concentrations of people and then nobody. And they still live nomadic, not as much as they used to, but a lot of them in the summertime will set up their gur, which is like a round hut, like a yurt, and they'll travel with their animals, and they go up the valleys, and the concept of private land like it exists here doesn't exist there. So they have valleys, like your family might be up one valley.
Yep.
My family might be up the other valley, and they're just nomadic. And so for me to experience that firsthand was incredible without even the horsemanship. But to throw the horses in there was even better. So I've been over there twice now.
Wow.
Central Mongolia is mostly Buddhist. So in Central Mongolia, we rode there. And then the second time I went back, they had eagle hunters right near Kazakhstan in the northwestern corner. They have the eagle hunters, and there's about 300 of them. And there's been a movie made with the first girl that became the eagle hunter.
Yep.
I can't remember the name of it offhand, but the town is Saksai, and they are Muslim, and most of them are from Kazakh. And so it's very, very interesting because the Mongolians, the first time I went over, the horses were what I would consider half wild. So I'm a pretty good horseman. I've ridden a long time. And when we went over and we looked at everything from the saddles, which are basically two pieces of wood with a rebar on the front and the back, and then a motorcycle seat, like a real motorcycle seat on there, and then they tie it down with some carpet.
Oh my gosh.
So that was the seat, and it was incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah, they ride miles in those.
Oh, it's incredible how far they ride. And so those horses, I had a good horse. So by the end of the 3 weeks we were riding, I could get on and off that horse without assistance. But the first week and a half, they're like, don't get off the horse. We'll hold the horse when you get on. We'll hold the horse when you get off. Don't take your raincoat off because they're not used to raincoats. So
they're pretty feral still.
They're pretty feral.
Lucky to be in there.
Yes, exactly. So a really funny story real quick is my horse was really good, and Rick had one that was a little bit different of a breed. It looked a little different, acted a little different. And so one day it was really hot, and I took my raincoat off. I unzipped it, which they tell you not to, and I took it off, and I put it in my thing. And my brother Rick looks over at me, and he says, "Hey, what?" I said, "Just unzip your coat and take it off." So he started to do that, and if you can picture in your mind, he's got his coat halfway off, his arm in the sleeve, and the horse took off.
Oh, dear.
So it wasn't bucking, it just took off.
Bolted.
So he literally rode out of sight and galloped away, probably a mile and a half, just disappeared. So the guide, Shidre, who doesn't speak any English, chases him and brought him back to the group. Finally caught him. The horse stopped, and they finally caught him and brought him back. And all Shidre did was walk around to us, and he just wiggled his finger, and he's like, "No, no, no." So that was the last time my brother tried to take that jacket off while he was riding. But they grow up on horses. There were kids that go out they're 8, 9 years old, and they go out and they watch the goats, they watch the herds, and they can't even get in the saddle. They literally throw them on the horse, and the kid goes out and watches the animals. If he jumps off, he has to find some way to get back on, whether crawling on these, and they're half wild horses. And the difference, it was interesting when we went up to the eagle hunters. So in Central Mongolia, they don't name their horses. So there's no names for the horses because they don't believe in that. But when you go...
Well, it's kind of like ownership kind of thing?
Yeah, it's like they have a spirit, they have, but they don't name them. When you go, and they also don't put shoes on their horses because the ground there, it's like steppe, so it's not real rough. So the horses have really hardy feet because that's how they live. And the ones with weak feet don't make it.
They're practically a wild animal at that point.
Exactly.
So
right.
The horses out west here don't need shoes.
No, exactly. It's like a Mustang,
yeah.
Right? So the Kazakhs, when you go up in the northwest corner, they're up in the hills and the mountains. They, for the first 5 years, don't put shoes on their horses. And then after 5 years, they'll put them on the fronts, only fronts, because they're digging around and going in through. And so both times, the first time we went over, we did like 150 miles on horseback in we're doing 10, 15 miles a day. And then...
On that rough saddle?
On that rough saddle. I had a rash where the rebar hit me on the rump. And we actually found some sheepskin or wool that was lying that some animal had lost. And I actually grabbed it and made it like a little sack, and I put it between my my rear end, and and I sat on that. That worked out.
Where's
great.
your moleskin at this
That's exactly right. You want the moleskin. But so then what we did the second time we went back, we did a pack raft trip and a horseback trip. So we did 180 miles in a pack raft and 200 in horseback. And we rode all the way up there's a glacier, and it's the highest point in Mongolia. And we rode up to that, and then we hiked up a little bit, and we were bordered right with Russia. So I walked all the way to where the border would be for Russia and then came back down. And we brought Western saddles back.
Oh, for that second time?
I said, we're bringing saddles this time. And so we brought a mix of English saddles, Western saddles.
How big are the horses?
They're skinny, first of all. They don't.
They're nomadic.
They're nomadic. So they, depending on how the winter was, you get some really good horses and some ones that are really skinny. I would say the biggest horses were maybe 13 and a half hands. If it was 14, that was big.
Wow.
But there were some that were a little stockier. We had some taller, bigger people. They rode those, but the horses, they're used to going. And the interesting thing, one of the other reasons that it's amazing there is you get on the horse in the morning, and it's not like a trail ride here. So a trail ride here, you go like nose to tail, you walk, you can't canter, you can't gallop. What I would do, once they realized you could ride, is I would let the group get way ahead of me, and I would go off to the right exploring. I'd go, a mile that way, and then I would literally canter or gallop for 2 or 3 miles to catch up.
In my head, from documentaries and everything I've seen, I'm thinking open, wide grasslands. If it's wintertime, they're fairly desolate looking.
Yes, that's a pretty good. So we rode right from the town of Tesseling, and we went up north. So the further north you got up, the more wooded it became. But they still use wood in their stoves and that kind of thing. So wood is scarce, but it's more like a steppe, right? When you picture in your mind, and it's open, and you can see forever, and you can ride any direction you want, and you just ride, and nobody says no, don't go there, And there was a moment, because I'd always dreamed about going. And so there was this one day I remember my brother and everybody went way ahead, and I just let them go way ahead, and I was just wandering around, and then I just started galloping. And even thinking about it now, I started crying. And I'm catching up, and I'm like, oh my God, I got to stop crying before I catch everybody, right? Because I'm going to look like such a fool. And my brother rides back to see what was going on because I was so far back. And I'm crying. He says, what are you crying for? And I'm like, I'm so happy. And it was just one of those moments that, it's just...
You get a taste of that life.
It's amazing.
It's a hard life, but
yes.
It's so... It's got to be just freeing.
It's incredible.
Liberally.
Yeah, it's incredible. And
so I have a question for you. If somebody were to have this dream, is this... obviously, by your reaction, I'm thinking the answer is yes.
Oh.
Today's day and age, would you still encourage people to take this trip?
Absolutely. Politically, it's a great country. Once you get there, it's a great country. We've used the same guide multiple times now. He speaks 5 languages, Russian, Kazakh, his regular Mongolian language, Tovan, which is another sect of people that live there. So he speaks a lot of these different languages and English. And, so we feel super comfortable with him and traveling with him. And we've now gone twice to our eagle friends in Saxai. And so we're getting to be good friends. They don't speak very good English, so we use Google Translate a lot. But
That's awesome.
I keep in touch with those guys. Sultan just had his birthday. And the second trip with the Kazakhs, we actually took camels with us as well.
Ooh.
So camels carried all our gear, and we rode the horses. And that was amazing to see how much a camel can carry.
How long of a trip are you guys out there for? Like, what's your length of stay?
When you go that far around the world, and you travel that far, and you pay that much for, let's say, $2,000 for airfare
alone,
right? $1,600 to $2,000. You don't want to come home in a week, right? And it's not long enough to get acclimated. So our actual trip from start to finish is almost 3 weeks. Our actual time on the actual trek is about 2 to 2.5 weeks. You spend maybe a day in Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital, at both ends, and then another day like in Saxai or the villages. So you're spending 2 or 3 days at either end, and then the bulk of the trip is really, what you're there for. And it's you want to go for an extended period of time.
What, other than passport will travel and getting yourself a flight, what other preparations did you have to do?
So I'm trying to think of vaccinations. So there are some vaccinations they recommend. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'd already had them for other trips. So I think like hepatitis B, tetanus, which everybody gets anyway. And there were maybe one or two others. But other than that, we just took, our first aid kit was general antibiotics, that you would take anywhere you go. We treated all our water. So we have a SteriPen, which is ultralight, and you just stick it in your Nalgene bottle and, you drink it.
What do you guys do for food while you're out there?
We figure out it's because it's nomadic, it's an amazing, amazing place. Every night, what would happen when we were traveling, we would try to find a gur. We would stay with a family. So we had tents. We would stay in a tent.
That welcoming, where you just...
Oh, you just show up. And so you can't pay them money because that's an insult. Because in a nomadic, right, if you have something that I need, you should share it with me, because maybe down the road you're going to come through where I live and you're going to need something. Like one day we didn't have much food, and there's a big festival over there that's called Naadam. Wrestling is a big thing, archery, mounted archery, and horses. That's their big, big, big stuff. So the Naadam festival was going on, and people were leaving the cars, and we just flagged down a bunch of cars, and they gave us all their leftover food. Oh. And we're like, hey, do you have any food? And they're like, yeah, here. Or they even offered it. You didn't even have to ask. And so what we did when we were in like Saksai, we knew we were going to be out for 10 days until we got to like it wasn't really a store, but it was a place where you could buy supplies. And so a lot of noodles, a lot of meat. If you're going to Mongolia,
a vegetarian's not for you.
A vegetarian it's very hard if you're a vegetarian. If you're a vegetarian, you should bring your own food. Let's put it that way, because a lot of this, it's just meat and potatoes. And the way they cook it is really interesting. In the gurs, they have a fire in the middle, and they put this monster pot on, and they heat up rocks, and they drop the rocks in the pot that's boiling. So the rocks help the water boil, and then they throw everything in. It just simmers like on the stove all day. And then at the end, they pull the rocks out, and then they serve everybody, your noodles, and they're fresh noodles that they make right in front of you. Huh. It's a pretty amazing culture.
I like the rock idea. I wonder, does that just keep the heat longer so you don't have to have as hot a fire?
Right, I think
wood's
so.
Scarce?
Yeah, because wood's very scarce. Yeah, so if you heat up the rocks and throw them in there, it's less energy, I think. So.
All right, that makes sense.
But it works. As long as you don't eat the rock, you're good.
Another thing that I couldn't help but notice from one of the documentaries I was watching was fermented mare's milk.
Oh my gosh. So they tell you there's a couple things you should not do when you're over there. And one of them is don't drink the fermented mare's milk because it carries a lot of whatever in it, right? But when in Rome, I had fermented milk and I loved it. I figured I'll be sick when I get home, right? I'll be sick by the time I get home. I'm not going to worry about it.
Also, you saved it for like the end.
That's right. So when you're going down the road, they've got these little, plastic Coke bottles, and it's all fermented mare's milk. And I'm like, yeah, I'm so trying that. And I tried it, and it was an interesting flavor. It was like you think it would be. Like it's not very potent, even though it's fermented. It's like what's that stuff?
Apparently it's apparently not enough fermented to kill whatever's in it.
No, definitely not. Yeah, definitely not. Now they also make a vodka. It's a clear off of the yogurt.
Oh,
so
interesting.
They have the big pot on the stove again, and they make like a little still that comes off the top of it, and it drips and drips and drips, and it's super clear. Again, not very strong. But what happens when you come into their house, you step into the gur, and everybody sits around, and you sit by order of age. And so what they do is they fill the cup up, and they go, I think it's left to right. I can't remember in my head, but I think it's left to right from oldest to youngest. And they go around 3 times because that's one of their traditions. It's a number, right? So everybody goes around. You don't really have to drink it if you don't want to. You can just put it up to your lips and pretend you're drinking it. But they send it around, and after everybody takes a sip, he puts more in it. And as you go around, everybody gets a sip, and they do it 3 times. So the first time, he hands a cup to everybody. The second time, you pass it around. And then the third time you pass it around as well. He'll fill it up if it gets empty. So it's kind of a neat tradition, and that was our welcoming. And they have crackers like you would get anywhere else, crackers and cookies that are in these, packages that they get. Pretty funny.
What is a typical day, sun up to sundown for you guys?
Let's say I told you I was going to meet you here tonight at 5.
Yeah.
You would expect me to be here at 5 or maybe a little before.
Somewhere in that
right?
range.
Somewhere in that range.
Give or take 10 minutes.
Give or take 10 minutes. It's not that way in Mongolia. Rick might say, okay, we're going to get up and have breakfast at 8. So everybody gets up, they take their things down, 8 o'clock. The guys that are doing the horses are just rolling out of their beds. The head guy went off because the horse took off last night, so he's off trying to find the horse that took off to run home. And maybe around 10 o'clock, they're starting to saddle the horses up and you're eating breakfast. And if you're lucky, by 10:30, you're actually on the horse going somewhere. The only day that, and so we would ride, 2 or 3 hours, crossing rivers, and just trotting around, mostly walk. Most of the people walked. I would canter and gallop and do things, but most of the people just either trotted or just walked. But maybe 2 hours later, you took a break, got off the horses, went to the bathroom, ride for another hour, and then we would have lunch. So they make a really strong, they dry it on these racks. If you look at pictures of Mongolia, you'll see these, it's yak cheese, and it just sits, it's like a hybrid cow. It's like a cross between a yak and a cow. They're really weird looking. And they use it for everything. That's their cheese, that's their meat, that's everything. And so they'll put the cheese up to dry, and it's super, super hard. It'll last forever.
Hard cheese.
Hard cheese. So what I would do,
yep.
Yeah, exactly. So what I would do is I would put a chunk in my pocket, like a pretty good sized chunk, and riding the horse, it was a ton of energy because it's super concentrated. So you put it in your mouth, you kind of broke it because you didn't want to bite it because it's so hard.
Oh my.
And you would put it in your mouth and it would just kind of dissolve, but it gave you a lot of energy. So I ate that all day, and it was a fermented kind of cheese. And they had a couple different kinds of cheese, but that was like the most popular kind of cheese. And we ate that, and then around 4 or 5 in the afternoon, you try to find a gur, and, you would camp there. And what the first time we brought 50 Leathermans, the multi-tool.
Oh, yeah, the multi-tools, yeah.
And because if you pay them, they're insulted. But you can always leave a gift. One of the ways that you would do that, we would leave a Leatherman for them. We would make a ceremony in the morning, not a ceremony, but we'd make everybody get together, and we would give the knife. And the other thing that we did is if people in the little tiny gurs had crafts, so they make hats, they make clothing, gloves, everything. So when we were the eagle hunters, I actually rode the eagle hunter's horse, which is pretty special because he had never let anybody ride his horse.
Ooh.
So when I went over, I knew I brought over a bunch of extra bridles, and I found some really fancy silver bits and different stuff. So I presented those to him. But I have a hat that's fox fur that his eagle killed the fox.
Oh, wow.
And then his wife made the hat, and then I bought the hat.
So is that how they actually
That's how they make money. Right. Yeah. They do a lot of herding, and they'll sell their horses back and forth, that kind of thing. But typically the herders, that's how they make money. They'll do clothing. The eagle hunters make clothing and sell it really beautiful. They also do a lot of rugs. You'll get really beautiful, beautiful felt rugs. Yeah, I have one at my house. I love it. It's so soft. And so they do a lot of crafts kind of stuff, and that's they don't live very expensively. They do have some solar in their gurs. They'll have like a solar with a battery. They have a light. Some of them have a TV that runs off. They have like a big dish. You go up to this gur in the middle of nowhere.
How long do they normally keep a gur up?
They move pretty frequently. So they'll go into an area, especially in the summer, and once the area has been grazed, they move. So it might be
4 to 6 weeks?
Yeah, probably about 4 to 6 weeks, and then they move. And it's very quick. And if you go by, like we stopped, there was a family taking it down, and it's polite to stop and help.
That's
and it's rude to go by.
They're decent size.
Yes.
They're like a yurt. They're big.
Yeah, and there's an inside wall. There's an outside wall. There's all the furniture. So we helped them load it up. They loaded it into a combination of a big Russian truck and then like ox cart kind of thing that the horses pulled. And so they've gone to, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your point of view, they're starting to do herding more and more on motorcycles.
Interesting.
because they're quicker, they're faster. You get out, you don't
They
have to
don't
catch
buck you
it.
off.
You don't have to get bucked off, right? The culture is switching a little bit, but for me, just to experience the way that people have lived for, a long time.
What's the path like? Do you guys do a big loop and then come back down to your original starting point? Do you have like a destination that you're aiming for, or?
Yeah, so the first trip we did a loop. So we went around, we did 200 miles. We went way up north into the trees, into the forest. There's a place called Blue Lake. It's beautiful, super sacred. And so we went up and then we came back a different way. The second time, what did we do? We did a circle there, but when we looked at a map, we didn't think we could get through the mountains. And the guides are like, oh, no, we could get through. We're like, have you ever been there? No, but we can get through. We did get through.
You Lewis and Clark your way through.
Oh, yeah. We believed them, and it was up and over, but it was a beautiful valley that we came out in. It was flowers. It was gorgeous, and it was amazing.
What time of year are you?
So we went in I think we went mostly in July or August. It was hot,
Okay.
but it also, I had a down jacket on many nights. It gets chilly at night.
It's kind of desert, even though
It's high.
plains,
It's like
so
high desert. Is the best way to describe it. It gets cold, and whatever you believe about global warming, part of the problem is the camels that they have, because they're in the Gobi Desert, which gets really cold. The camels are having a harder time because it's staying warmer longer and not getting as cold.
I was going to
So
ask
they're
about
struggling.
what did you see about environmental impacts?
Right. So one of the environmental impacts is that a lot of the camel guys, there's not as much work for them as much anymore. So the herds are smaller, and the winters are not as harsh anymore. So they're having a hard time because they're well adapted for cold. Believe it. I never thought of a camel being.
Those are the ones like furry. I've seen them before where they're like trudging.
Oh, they're
like a Russian kind of camel.
Yeah.
They're like
So if you look at them, they've got and they're the same thing. They live halfway wild until you catch them. So it's pretty amazing. I mean, if you close your eyes and try to picture it, it's hard. But every time I think about being there, one of my future goals, hopefully, there's a population of people they're called the reindeer people. You could look it up on Google or not Google or YouTube.
Mhm.
And there's only about 300 of them left. And there used to be in the thousands, and they live way, way up, almost on the Russian border. And everything they do, they ride the reindeer. They're reindeer herds. They eat the reindeer. They survive off the reindeer.
not big animals.
They're not big animals, but what's been happening there, they used to have herds of tens of thousands. And so they used to trade. So it's just genetics, right? Just like it is anywhere else. So their genetic pool is getting smaller and smaller. So the reindeer are getting smaller, and they're getting more sickly. And there's only about 300 of these people left. And part of the problem is when they have kids, all the kids want to go to the city because it's a harsh life, as you can imagine. And even further north, it's even worse, right? Because it's cold, say 9 months out of the year. So one of my future trips, at fingers crossed, is I want to go with the guide and each get 2 horses each and just ride for a month and go up and see the reindeer people and ride back. I'm hoping 2024? 2026 is when I'm hoping to do that. So stay tuned.
Oh my gosh, you just make me want to go there, and I'm just going, I am so tall.
You'd fit. We'd find you a horse. We could find you a horse.
I'd be walking the horse.
No. We had people that were pretty tall, and you look silly, but the horses, they're made. They go, like, if they were on a trip, they'll go 50 to 70 kilometers all day long. And when you watch like the Mongolian Derby, right? Which
I've seen it.
Yeah, so they're riding those horses a long ways, and they're going.
Just cruise along. Oh, that's awesome.
And I cantered, I think, for 3 or 4 miles, and my horse hadn't even broken a sweat.
All right. How is the gait? Because I've been on a bazillion different things. You and I were talking the difference between trail horse and carriage horse, and how I'm having a miserable time with my carriage horse on the trail.
Right. So it's just, so even though they're the same breeding, more or less, there's a lot of difference in gaits. I was lucky both times that I had a really, really nice horse, and it's more like riding a pony. So it's a little quicker gait, short and quick, but it's comfortable.
Okay.
And they have this trot, And the way the Mongolians ride, if you watch, they have longer or shorter stirrups, and they kind of stand.
Yeah, they seem to like...
They don't sit.
Perched.
Yeah, they're perched. That's a good way to put it. They're perched on top. And so they're not sitting a lot like we sit. And
I'm always kind of curious about their choice of saddle and how they sit and how high they sit. And with a big plane, does that give them a better viewpoint? Like, what's the purpose of being up there?
I have no idea. It's just the way that their saddles... I think from practical purposes of it's wood, right? It's just a wooden, it's not leather, because leather deteriorates quickly.
Especially crazy in the weather. Yeah.
In crazy weather. So I think it's probably practical. And then what they do, there's certain areas we didn't go, but they'll round up their horses. They have these long sticks, like 10-foot long stick with a rope on the end. So instead of a lasso, they get it with these sticks. So they're leaning forward and reaching out and grabbing the horse.
Yeah.
And where I was in Mongolia, he actually roped the horses with a rope. And so it's different parts of Mongolia are all...
His very Spanish, Western,
right,
kind of thing. And believe it, the sticks, like they use that in Africa too to catch a lot of things.
Yes.
So it's an interesting change of how people...
And even in Mongolia, from end to end, it's so different. Even the way they treat their horses is totally different.
If you have a wood saddle, how are they protecting the horse's back?
So that's interesting as well. So when we got there, this is one of the things that they didn't realize. Well, they knew there was going to be that many of us, but we got there and they didn't have saddles, so they had to go find some more saddles. So they scared up like 2 English saddles that were pretty much falling apart, had no girth. So they took the plastic that maybe is around hay bales, and they make a probably 8-cord weave. So they braid it together in 8-cord weave, and that's the girth. And they put it around and they tie it. So that's your girth.
You better have good center of gravity.
Yeah, exactly, right? And we didn't lose any of them, surprisingly. They tightened it pretty. It's pretty tight. So they have, that. And then what they were doing is they were just plopping the saddles on, and the guides and the horse people that were there with their own horses, they had pads, but not like we have pads. So what we ended up doing is we ended up putting towels under there. I'm like, that horse, you can't just put that saddle on that horse like that. So what you're saying is your next time you should just I would recommend
a bunch of saddle pads as a gift.
So when we go over, right, we went over this second time, is I sent over another saddle. We took a bunch of English saddles, and we took 2 or 3 Western saddles, and then we took saddlebags, and I left everything over there, including my boots, when I came back. At the end of your trek, what you do is you sit around with everybody that was on the trip, and there's a hierarchy just like everywhere else, right? So what we did to make it so they figure out the hierarchy, anything you want to donate, anything you want to leave, you just put in a pile, and they divide it. Then you don't have to worry about. But if there was something special, like I found this really beautiful knife when I was there. I'm a big fan of wherever anybody's camped. I don't care where it is. I always go and look where people have camped. And
you never know.
I was riding, and I found this beautiful horn-made handle knife, and one of the assistant horse guys, he was eyeing it, and I kept using it every time I saw him, and I was laughing, and I'm pulling it out and making fun. And I'm like, hey, you like my knife? So at the end of the trip, I gave it to him. So you could give specific stuff to specific people, but the majority of stuff, like I always bring clothes that I know I'm going to leave. Mostly, pretty much wherever I travel in this kind of countries, I always leave my boots. I leave the equipment. We left all the saddles. They decide. So then this time when we went, they already had some saddles, so we just brought more, and I brought a ton of pads. I set a bunch of pads over and a bunch of bridles.
It sounds like something like, I know from English people, we have a pad hoarding problem. Right. Like, I own 1 saddle, but I have 32 pads.
Yeah.
And every color of the rainbow.
Right.
It's almost like, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Find the ones that you're willing to part with, and, your next trip to Mongolia.
Yes. Well, here's a plug for Begin Again. They gave us a saddle to take over. They gave us saddle pads. We purchased a bunch of them, but they were more than wonderful in helping us out.
Great organization.
So, yeah. Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome.
Definitely.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if somebody is thinking in the next year or two that this might be an option, are you guys for hire? How does that work?
So for my brother to do it, it would have to be a group of 4 or more to make it, profitable on our end, obviously, because it's
right,
a business.
it's your business.
Right, it's a business. So 4 people, he would probably break even, right? So if you wanted to go with 4 people, you could call him up and say, hey, I've got 4 people. We want to go to Mongolia. If that was the case, he might say, hey, Steve, do you want to go to Mongolia? And I'd be like, yep, I'm in. So he might send me instead, right?
Yep.
And he would set up, you could say I wanted a hard trip. So this last one they did, the one we did for 200 miles the first time, they did 100 miles this time. So what they did is they rode in a van a little bit further up and then got on the horses, because we rode through country.
A city or
So we rode through that kind of stuff, which, and they drove out of that and then rode where it was maybe more beautiful. So they didn't go quite as long. But I would say you want to give yourself 2 weeks in the country to make it worth your time and your money that you're spending. Once you get there, it's not expensive. Ground costs, I don't know, what we pay, but it's our guide, I think we gave him so where they make their money is on the tips, right? So our guide.
As a trail guide, I know this.
Yes, exactly.
I lived off my tips.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we paid him $50 a day, which is more than he usually gets. And then the assistant horse guy got like $10 a day. The cook got, so it breaks down. But if you take a group of 4, it's cheaper if you take a bigger group.
So you just mentioned a cook and, assistant guides.
Right.
How many, so as a party, say you're a party of 5 or 6 that went over there.
Yep.
How many people did you have with you for that trip?
So the last time we went to the Eagle Hunters, we had N.A., who was our translator, and then Sultan and Norca. Norca was the camel guy, and Sultan was the horse guy, and that was it. So it was just 3 people. And, you've got your translator, and you got people that know the horses and the camels, and then, they know how to cook. It was never, a big deal as far as, who was going to cook and who was going to do what.
God, I'm fascinated by this.
So, yeah. Oh, you should go. Everybody should go. And you should go before it's ruined.
Yeah, that's the scary part is, half of our Canada burned to the ground last year, practically.
Right.
We got San Diego's underwater. What was the last time they saw that?
Right.
The weather is going nuts, and so is the political system.
Right. Well,
in place,
and the same is
terrifying.
And the same is true in Mongolia, because Mongolia has, I believe I don't know if it's number 1, but their coal in the ground is, when they grade coal, it's the best grade of coal. So China wants their coal. They have,
gosh, that would ruin all of that.
They have all kinds of minerals. All kinds, all over the country. So there's a lot of corruption in the government, and it's a big issue as far as trying to keep the nomadic life versus how are they going to survive as a people.
Yeah.
They're very well educated. I think it's like 80 or 95% literacy rate.
Really?
They educate their kids. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Huh. That I would not have guessed for some reason, especially on a nomadic lifestyle.
Right. So what they do is they send their kids during the summer or the winter, during the school year, they go to school in the towns. And then in the summers, they come back out and do the nomadic thing.
So kind of like they board their kids?
They board their kids.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
Just so they have
an education.
That's amazing. That's a sacrifice.
It is a sacrifice, yeah.
What is the flight path you guys take to get there?
I got to think. We flew...
Because that's like...
to South Korea. Yeah, we flew to South Korea. And then South to Korea. So we flew from here, I think, to maybe New York City or Toronto. No, we flew out of Toronto. So we flew from Toronto to South Korea. And then
straight flight?
I think, maybe not. We might have stopped somewhere in the middle there. But I know we ended up in South Korea because we spent a day in South Korea, which is highly recommended as well, because there's palaces and cool places to see there.
You got K-pop.
And there you go. That's right. You can dance all you want.
Yeah, I'll just go for a party game and style.
We flew to Ulaanbaatar, and then we flew from there to Saksai, which is up in the northwestern corner. But we also, from Ulaanbaatar, you can take a car to Tesseling and do a tour from there.
Fascinating.
So, yeah.
You see, you were terrified of the sheet that I brought, and
I
you
know.
realize you've hit everything on this one.
See, look at that.
You did great. We're pretty much ready to wrap this up. So what? Now that you're home, you've gone through this twice. What's your favorite takeaway of it? What's your most cherished memory that you have?
When I travel, sometimes when I was younger, like I've been to Africa and I've climbed Kilimanjaro 3 times. And when I went over the first time, my goal was to climb the mountain, to get to the top. Once I got off the mountain and had been with people in Africa for almost 3 weeks there again, they became my friends. And when I look back on it, I would have been just as happy if I never got to the top of that mountain. And Mongolia is the same way. The first trip I was there, because it had been such a lifelong dream. So picture, if you will, we're sitting in the gur of Shidre, who doesn't speak any English. We're staying in his gur right outside of town for the last night. We went into town. I rode on the back of a moped to the butcher shop. He bought all kinds of meat, brought it back, cooked it up. I went riding with his son off up this hill and raced down and back. And so after dinner, we all sat around and, Rick had everybody go around and share, what they liked about the trip, what they, liked about being in Mongolia. And when it got to me, I started crying.
You're not an emotional man.
Because I'm pretty emotional anyway. People see me cry all the time. And it was one of those experiences, and it was the people. So even though I didn't speak Mongolian, by the end I knew a couple little phrases, but even though I didn't, we became friends.
I can tell because you have readily named off these people.
Oh, yeah.
Like they were brothers.
Oh, yeah. And that's what
you don't
it
even
is.
hesitate or even attempt to go, oh, what was that guy's name?
No. You really get to be friends. You laugh, you joke, you race horses, you jump off and on the horse, you goof around. And for me, when I travel, I think it's pretty much everywhere I've traveled, but the kindness. And a really, really good example is I always travel with them because it's a great conversation starter. They're called kendamas. And it's basically, the old ball in a cup that you flip around? Well, a kendama has got a point on one end and 2 cups on the side and one on the bottom. This whole trip, I broke it out. So we're on the horses. At first, we're doing it at a walk, right? We're trying to do it, land in the cup, and then I pass it off. And Sultan would do it, then Norka would do it, and we'd laugh. So then we got to do it at a trot. So now we're trying to get it on these things at a trot. Then we try to do it at canter and a gallop. The whole time we're doing this, we're just having a great time with it. Towards the end of the trip, Sultan didn't have any kids, and Norka had his family. And he had a baby. His kids were young. So I gave the kendama to Sultan because he and I had messed around with it the most.
Mm-hmm.
And without even thinking, he turned around. And it's fun to have something that you would like, right?
Right.
And he immediately said, oh, Norka should have this because he has children. And
So
I think that
selfless
encapsulates
there.
the selflessness. And so what I take away from that is that's how I want to live my life, right? I want to be selfless. I want to help people just because. I want to give away. When I was in Cuba, we were at a sugar plantation. And you go and they do a coffee kind of thing, and the guy sings a song, and he's beating the thing, and and they don't have a lot of money in Cuba. And I had this necklace that my sister-in-law gave me. It was a beautiful necklace, sterling silver, and it was the Man in the Maze. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's an Anasazi or from Southwest, and it's basically got the Indian native little figure, and it's a maze. And I call it the Man in the Maze because it's, and it could mean anything, right? Journey in life, journey, whatever. And there's a lot of speculation on what it really means. To me, it's like your journey in life, right? So whatever moved me, I took it off and I gave it to him. And to give something that means so much to you is an incredible experience, as opposed to just, I'm going to bring an extra pair of shoes and I'm going to give them away.
Or to toss money at somebody.
Or to toss money.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, here's the deal. And I started crying. He started crying. He hugged me. And I told him, I said, you can't sell this. I said, you can give it away. You can trade it, but you can't sell it. and he understood it. I had a translator. And then we had horses there. I got on the horse and I took off because I'm like crying my eyes out. I'm like, yep, I'm gone. I'm gone. So yeah, right.
This has not been a theme.
No, I know, right? So I take off. That was 4 years ago. My brother went down this last year, and they went to the same place. And the guy got all excited, and he went and got it and showed him that he still had it.
Oh.
And those kinds of moments, right?
I can see why you get teary-eyed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I can see it.
It's and that's why we travel, right? Because we hear all these bad things about all these countries. And to travel and see the people, not the government, is incredible.
That's definitely the way to do it. So, you, brother, horseback riding there, male-dominated. Horseback riding here, fairly female-dominated. How do they handle women?
Girls ride.
They do?
Yep. When you get, the more rural you get, they'll jump on a horse and they go too. Not as much as the boys. The boys are usually the ones that are doing they're pretty, they're
boys are
chores.
boys.
Boys are boys, right. So it's not anything that's out there, but like the eagle hunters was very male. That was it. And now there's more than one or two women that are doing eagle hunting because now they're realizing they want to keep their tradition of eagle hunting alive more than they care about who's doing
tradition. Yeah.
And so it's changing for the better, obviously. And it's an amazing country. And the way to see it is on horseback.
Steve, I have been flabbergasted. I knew I had to talk to you, and I'm so thankful that you agreed to that. And can't wait to get you back in the saddle. And for those that don't know, Steve and I met each other on a whim through us wankers.
Right.
Through a driving horse and this beautiful little horse, Zorro, there. You're just as crazy as I am, and I love it.
And I'm having a great time, and it's fun to meet you. And I've been listening to your podcast like all the time, so they're a lot of fun.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much tonight, and we'll meet you in the show ring this year.
Oh yeah, bring it on, baby. We're going fast.
Are you stepping up?
I was thinking maybe a stepping up. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
He's a canner world. I like it.
We might do that.
Awesome. Thank you. You have yourself.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for dinner.
You're welcome.
Anybody that wants to go with Lindsay, she'll buy you dinner if you talk to her.
True. Dinner, drink. This is lifetime now.
Thanks, Lindsay.
You're welcome.
Night.
Thank you guys for joining in on Steve's adventure. I'll put links to Pack, Paddle, and Ski in the show notes along with a YouTube video that Steve made of his last trip with the eagle hunters. First 4 minutes of the video is of a local throat singer who is fascinating to listen to, but if that's not your gig, scroll to the 450 mark to see the photos and short videos of the trip itself. If you found the content of this podcast interesting or not, please take a moment to share, like, follow, subscribe, or leave a review. This helps keep me motivated to continue making new episodes. Well, until next time, make sure you respect the trail, wear a helmet, and leave no trace at your trailer site. Happy trails!